Hello everyone. I thought I'll do something a bit different in this video. I've seen a lot of content going around asking the question of whether or not it's worth getting into Salesforce in 2024. So I thought I'd put together this quick video to share with you my experiences within the Salesforce ecosystem. I want to talk about what the job is actually like on the day-to-day. We'll touch a little bit on the two most popular career paths, in my opinion, which are administrators and consultants. I'll also share a little bit with you about how I got started in the ecosystem. And then we'll move on to some of the concepts, some of the tools, some of the knowledge or approach that you need to have, in my opinion, to be able to be successful in this ecosystem. And then we'll finish the video talking about what kind of mindset you need to have to kind of stay on top of things as the industry grows. So this is going to be a bit of a personal video, I suppose. If you're familiar with my channel, generally my videos are more solution focused. I kind of provide a use case and then I demonstrate a solution to satisfy that use case. But I thought I'd make something a bit different, hopefully to help some of the new people that are thinking of joining or have recently joined the ecosystem, and also to give a bit of a refresh to everybody who I suppose likes my content. So I want to start with the bigger question, which is Salesforce worth it? Is it worth joining the Salesforce ecosystem in 2024? And the short answer for me, in my opinion, is absolutely yes. There are a ton of new solutions and features coming out all the time. Of course, at the moment, everything is very AI driven. We're hoping this will kind of settle at some point, but I still think it's a great time to be joining the ecosystem. There are plenty of jobs out there. There are plenty of opportunities and really interesting projects to be part of. So I definitely think that it's worth your time. Now, when it comes to the question of what career path you should take, there are a ton of videos out there. I know Salesforce Ben has been pumping out a lot of content explaining the different paths as well, which I think it's a great thing because they tend to get a lot of people involved and they share their personal experiences. So if you're looking to learn about all the possible paths that you could take within the Salesforce ecosystem, Salesforce Ben is a great resource to review. But in my opinion, I think it generally comes down to two most popular paths when you're starting out. And that's generally a Salesforce administrator versus a Salesforce consultant. Now, again, this is a question that a lot of people have been asking for many, many years. And so there's a lot of content out there that will go into a very, very detailed pros and cons of each. I think at the end of the day is really down to you and what you take. But I wanted to share with you my experience and hopefully maybe you can find that helpful. So I started Salesforce back in 2017, but I was at university then and I was just doing Trailhead in my spare time. It was a very part-time thing. I wasn't working in the Salesforce ecosystem. I was just doing Trailhead mostly on the weekends here and there, just to try and get with the concept of everything. Then around 2020 is when I decided to get my admin certificate, which back then was sort of the entry point into the certification ladder, if you will. And then I got my first job as a Salesforce administrator. So when it comes to administrators, the way that I like to look at it is administrators generally are there to maintain the system and to slowly improve and grow the system. Whereas consultants come in when you either don't have Salesforce yet and you need that to be implemented in one big chunk, or where you already have Salesforce, but there are a lot of improvements that needs to happen in a smaller time frame. And so you bring in a team of consultants to kind of push everything through. So they're very different kind of career paths, but their skills are very interlinked. As an administrator in my previous administration jobs, what I ended up doing is very much maintenance. Creating new users, deactivating old users, managing records ownership, creating reports. And then on the side, I was doing very small kind of UX improvements for the end users. Maybe some buttons weren't quite doing what they wanted to do, or maybe some of the page layouts weren't very good. And so I was moving things around, relabeling things, creating list views, and so on. Very I guess basic things, but that made a huge impact to the end user. Now, this was a very small team. It was a small company. I didn't have a senior admin working with me. So, depending on where you work as an administrator, your experiences can change quite a lot. There are a lot of administrators out there who generally end up doing the job of a consultant because they have a big team or they're working as part of a big implementation. But in my experience, the administrator role was very much just a maintenance sort of thing. So after I did that for a few months, I decided to move on to trying to be a consultant. And that was full on build. I was on one project after the other, just building. It was essentially just requirements written down in an Excel spreadsheet, and then I'll go off and I'll build it. And it was just a lot of time doing all kinds of configuration. So as you can imagine, I had no idea how to do most of that stuff. So it was a lot of Googling, a lot of watching YouTube, a lot of checking different resources, figure out how to do it, and then go try and do it. Make it work, demonstrate it to the client, and kind of go from there. Now, after a few years of this, then I started getting involved with the other sides of being a consultant, like reviewing client requirements, leading workshops, writing documentation, creating user stories, estimating work effort, and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose I kind of made the shift into being a little bit more of a functional consultant, but it really depends on what that means to you and to the company. Sometimes I've worked for companies where they called me a technical consultant, even though I didn't know how to code, and it was very much just doing what I've just described. But for them, that's what a technical consultant was, whereas functional consultant was very much more like an architect. And then for other companies, I was a functional consultant, even though I was doing the same job. And then architects were actually called architects. And so the naming convention I found kind of changes from company to company, but generally that's what I was doing. Now, I preferred being a consultant. I do like to get involved more with the client. I like running workshops. I like talking. I like communicating, explaining things. And so that kind of role suited me a little bit more. But ultimately, it's going to be down to you. My recommendation, however, would always be to start off as an administrator, then move on to a consultant. Now, if you already know that the consultant path doesn't really align with you, then you can stay as an administrator, or you can explore any of the other possible paths available to you. But if you're unsure, I highly recommend that you try both. Be an administrator first, get a feel for things, and then move on and be a consultant for a little bit. And then once you have both experiences under your belt, you're then in a good position to be able to figure out which one suits you best. Now, I want to touch base on the Salesforce mission of not needing how to code. And they refer to this as clicks, not code. And I kind of love that because I am someone who always wanted to know how to code, but I could never do it. I never really dedicated my time to learning, but every time I sat down to try and learn, my mind would go elsewhere. I would get bored or feel tired. I just couldn't bring myself to learn how to code. Now, if I were someone who could code, I will probably be spending a lot of my time building things because I love that. Building solutions, apps, websites, all kinds of different things, really outside of Salesforce, to be honest with you. But because my brain just can't grasp that, then Salesforce worked out really well for me, especially because their mission is to move away from code and more towards clicks. So that suited me really, really well. I've been able to have a successful career as a consultant for years now, and I have no idea how to code. I really don't. I don't know how to write any code at all. Now, over the years, I have learned how to review some Apex code because that's more in the Salesforce realm, but I still wouldn't know how to write it. I can look at some code and I can review it and I can kind of get the gist of what's going on, but it still wouldn't be something that I will take on as a job within my role. I'll still want to pass that on to a technical person who can then properly review that and then write the code. But having said that, I really, really like the way that Salesforce is going about with this. Obviously, it suits me because I don't know how to code, and I think that I don't want to learn how to code anymore. I think I kind of gave up on that journey. I know it's never too late, but I've just been so busy with everything else that I can't find the appropriate time to sit down and get that done. I also feel like because I don't use that on my day-to-day job, I'll probably end up forgetting it just because I won't have a lot of time to practice it. So I'd prefer to learn things that I will actually use on the day to day and then be able to improve myself as a consultant in general. Now, as you know, everything these days is pretty much AI. And so there is no surprise that Salesforce has been focused on developing AI driven products. With that comes a lot of uncertainty for us because we don't really know what they're going to be replacing. Thankfully, however, a lot of these AI solutions do tend to require some build on the back end. They do tend to require some sort of maintenance, and it's not something that generally is just available like ChatGPT. For example, the Prompt Builder, which is one of Salesforce's AI-driven solutions, is an amazing tool to be able to summarize things within Salesforce, as an example. Now, in order to do that efficiently and effectively as an end user, you need a prompt template. And in order to create a prompt template, it is most likely going to fall under the administrator or the consultant's bucket in terms of things to do. I think it will be quite unlikely that you would get supervisors or managers going into the back end to create these templates. I also hope that your supervisors and managers don't actually have access to the setup in Salesforce, but you never know. I've seen quite a few things in my time. Now, with that, I guess comes the aspect and the mindset of being in the Salesforce ecosystem. And it is a mindset that's very driven towards learning, constant learning. And so I'm a consultant at the moment, and I'm always learning. I'm always on Trailhead, learning new things. I'm always checking release notes, reviewing them, sometimes trying them out on pre-release orgs beforehand just to understand what's coming. Sometimes I need to check certain features to know how it will impact my current project and my project timeline. So you do need to have this constant urge to go out there and learn something new. It's definitely not something that you learn once and then you never go back to it. Things change a lot in Salesforce. Features get retired, they get removed from your orgs, the Salesforce stops supporting those features, and then they introduce something new that is intended to replace the old feature. And if you don't know how to use this new feature, essentially you've now lost a huge block of skill that is required to be a successful administrator or a consultant. A great example of this is process builders versus flows. Now, when I started Salesforce, everything was process builders. And those who knew how to create flows were regarded in a much higher level of intelligence and knowledge against those who only knew process builders. Now, I was new to the Salesforce ecosystem. I obviously only or barely knew process builders, let alone flows. I always thought flows were super scary, never really understood them. So every automation that I needed to build pretty much fell into a process builder template. Now, over the years, as you might be aware, process builders became retired and the support started to slowly drop, and everybody had to move to flows. And it was a huge learning experience to get everybody to learn how to use flows. And flows is super complicated. There is so many possibilities of things you can do that it's very difficult as a new person to take that concept and understand that actually, although it's a tool that can do many complex things, it's also a very complex tool that can do many simple things. You can have a flow with one element or a few elements. You don't need to have loops and decisions and screens. You can have a very, very basic flow that perhaps it only takes a few minutes to build that can do a really useful automation. But that concept was very difficult for me to understand in the beginning. I always thought, well, this is a flow, so I'm going to have loads of elements and variables and this and that. In fact, that's really not the case. Today, I'm quite good with flows. I'm quite confident with flows. And so I can do pretty much anything that I need to do within a flow, but that's not how the story began. And so I think this is a really good example of how sometimes you have to learn, you have no choice. If I didn't learn flows, then today I would be in a position where every time I need to create an automation, I'll have to pass that work on to someone else. And so naturally, I'll lose a big block of skill within my consultant tool bag, which would have made it more difficult for me to land jobs. It would have made more difficult for me to get promotions and all that kind of stuff. And so you do have to constantly keep learning. You have to have an open mind. Sometimes you just need to learn something you don't want to, but that's the way it goes. People are different. They learn in different ways. But something that has really worked out well for me is teaching someone else. And actually, this is one of the main purposes of my YouTube channel. This way, I get to share with you and teach other people how to do something. And usually after I do that, I understand that thing much better. And so this is just one of the ways that I found that helps me. But there are many other ways. For example, interacting with the community. Salesforce has an amazing community that generally is very active. You can find them on LinkedIn, Twitter, Slack, Discord channels, and depending where you live, you probably have a live event every month. I'm based in London, and there is an admin group, for example, in London every month. There's also a dev meetup. There's an architect meetup. There are all kinds of meetups that happen every month in London and many other places as well. So do check that out. Trailhead and the Trailhead community is really, really huge. There is a forum there that you can check out and meet lots of new people and help each other. And I think that's also one of the great ways to improve yourself. So anyway, hopefully you found this video helpful. I just wanted to share with you some of my personal experiences. And if you are in the position where you're thinking, should I get into Salesforce? Should I not get into Salesforce? Is it a good time? Is everything just going to be AI and they won't need us anymore? The answer is, in my opinion, it's a great time to get into Salesforce, and you definitely should do it. If you need help with anything else or you like to connect with me, by all means, please do so. And if you have any feedback, as always, they're much appreciated. Just drop a comment down below. Thanks for watching. Until next time.